everybody. Welcome to the Cinema MD podcast. My name is Matt.
And I'm Dana.
So today we're going to go back to our original format where we talk about a movie that Dana has managed to not see in her first 32 years of life. And it's a movie that I feel like everybody has seen. And Dana, you want to go ahead and kind of talk about maybe why you have managed to avoid this movie all this time and tell everyone what it is?
So I think I have not seen this movie, that movie being Robocop, because I spent many years thinking that I had seen it. Like, I think I just assumed that I saw it as a little kid and just didn't really remember it. After giving it a rewatch today, I see that that is not the case. I have never seen this movie. But we were talking about earlier that, this was not totally marketed towards kids, but, there were toys, there were, I'm sure lunchboxes and all the kid merchandise. And when you watch this movie, not that it's super bloody, but definitely not a movie for kids.
It's super bloody. This is like 80s vintage Paul Verhoeven, like at his absolute best. I mean, you've got limbs blown off. You've got like headshots, just straight up, just blood squirting out of necks. You got a guy that gets dumped into a vat of toxic waste and is just like melting and crawling around and yelling for help, and then he gets vaporized by a fucking car. You got some tits, you got some blood, you got constant swearing. I mean, you got F-bombs every like 30 seconds in this movie. This is as far from a kids movie as is humanly possible, and somehow, I mean, don't get me wrong, they marketed Terminator to kids eventually too. But even Terminator, even though it's definitely a violent, kind of a, suspenseful movie, it's not nearly as just flat out, gory and filled with F-bombs and bloodshed as Robocop.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous, but still entertaining. It wasn't too over the top to still enjoy, I would say.
One of the things that is cool about Robocop to me, like seeing it again now, it's been a little while since I've seen this movie, is the direct, being a Verhoeven movie, my personal favorite is Total Recall, and there's definitely a lot of similarities between this and Total Recall. The kind of weird satirical humor you've got going on in both, and that's something that carries over into like Starship Troopers from Verhoeven as well. And that was actually, I know Starship Troopers was written by the same guy that wrote Robocop. I don't know about Total Recall. But all of his movies, super violent, and the violence is very like visceral. Like, he doesn't use a lot of CG for the violence. I mean, it's like
practical effects.
Yeah, I mean, there's just fake blood squirting everywhere. It's great. But it's not CG fake. It's like blood packets and all that kind of good stuff, which is so much better. It's just It feels like it has some heft to it, I hate CG blood. It's like the worst thing they ever started doing.
Yeah, I agree. It was also fun in this movie to watch some of the actors that I recognize in other things after RoboCop play these roles. Notably, Red from that 70s show as the main bad guy there. It was kind of hard for me to see him as a bad guy. He just kind of seemed cranky, I guess, because I just was thinking of that sitcom. But he was fun, for sure, to see that. Also, lately, I've been watching a lot of old ER reruns, and another one of the guys in that gang is Dr. Romano, if anyone out there knows what the hell I'm talking about. It was super funny to see him as, like, a kind of a villain, I guess.
Isn't he the fucking annoying one that gets his arm cut off?
I don't think that I finished watching the entire series of ER. I think a helicopter lands on him, like explodes on him. It got to a weird place on ER.
He dies because a helicopter crashes and like falls onto him.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
That show jumped the shark. Like, it got ridiculous. It used to be quality stuff, and then it just fell into the shitter.
Yeah, I agree, which is why I'm watching the old episodes, being a purist over here.
Listen, Noah Wyle, he couldn't fill Clooney's shoes, man. Couldn't do it.
No.
The other thing I want to talk about is the satire. I mentioned it, but holy crap. Just ripping kind of this whole privatization, corporate America thing, which is, very similar to kind of what he does in Starship Troopers, especially. In Starship Troopers, you've got like the propaganda, recruiting ads, the kids squashing the bugs, and you can do your part and all that stuff, and it's hilarious. And you've got very similar stuff going on in RoboCop, just kind of criticizes like television media. You've got like news shows being criticized. You've got sitcoms with the goofy ass dude. What is his fucking tagline in this? Like, I'd buy it for $1. Yeah, the guy's hilarious. But it's all just so over the top. Ed 209 is also something that has to be mentioned because such a cool design, first of all, for a robot, and man, he is pathetic. Ed 209 is like the biggest fucking useless piece of garbage ever. Like, he does nothing. He kills someone he's not supposed to, and that's the only thing he does in the entire movie other than fall down the stairs. Yeah,
it seemed like true to the corporate world, they try to roll stuff out before it's ready, and you got the volunteer guy getting shot to hell. And then, the major design flaw of it can't tackle stairs to the point where it literally falls down the stairs and then has a little robot tantrum.
Oh, yeah, it like squeals and like slams its arms up and down and legs up and down. I love Ed 209. Ed 209's great. I'm not going to get into Robocop 2 because we're not talking about that right now. But there's a great scene in Robocop 2 where they like roll out like 3 new Robocop prototype robots. And if you haven't seen Robocop 2, I would like YouTube that scene in particular because it's fucking hilarious. Very reminiscent of Ed 209 being a complete failure, only you get to see more robots completely fail. It's great. It's hilarious. Another thing, how did you not see this movie, like, after all, like, we're from Detroit. We're, like, based, like, 15 minutes outside of, like, downtown Detroit, basically. How have you gone without seeing this? Is it like RoboCop's like an iconic Detroit movie? Like we own this movie. This is like about us.
Well, okay. When you say we own this movie, I just assume you mean you personally own it because you own most movies. But like I said, I think that I went for like my full teenage years and probably through my early 20s just assuming I had seen this at some point and just kind of forgot about it. I know you had mentioned earlier there was a cartoon at some point, so I bet I watched the cartoon and got the gist.
Well, there was a RoboCop cartoon. RoboCop 3 is a travesty. It's also the first one that's not rated R, I believe. I think RoboCop 2 stuck with the R rating, but RoboCop 3 sucks. And the RoboCop cartoon is obviously a Saturday morning cartoon, so it can't possibly be as cool as RoboCop.
Yeah, and this will show the lack of research I've done. I know there was talk about the RoboCop statue going up in Detroit. Did that ever happen? Was that a thing? I mean, if anyone out there is
really
aware.
Know. I think that they were planning on it. I don't know if it's actually been like commissioned yet, or if it's being made. I really don't know.
It just that thought, seeing the movie or not seeing the movie, that always kind of bummed me out. That like really that's gonna be. Detroit's legacy is RoboCop, in which the city is still, depicted as a crime den, and, you've got the corporate greed, and it seems like a really bad idea to be like, this is going to be the symbol of Detroit.
Well, I mean, what we've got right now is Joe Louis, he's a fighter.
Well, yeah, but that makes sense. I mean, he's like a boxer. He's,
and then we've got the Baphomet statue for the Church of Satan. That's what we got downtown Detroit right now.
Yeah, that about sums it up.
So yeah, RoboCop, my opinion, valid addition. So yeah, I don't know how Dana hasn't seen this movie, but we both liked it. I've always loved this movie. Dana saw it; she thought it was great too. So.
Oh, we should mention one more thing before we move on here. So, Matt and I have had sort of a running joke in that I can never remember the name of the composer to another favorite 80s movies of ours, which I totally saw both these movies as a kid, being Conan the Barbarian. Loved those movies growing up. Has a very, broad, sweeping, iconic soundtrack, and the composer has the most ridiculous name of all time.
Basil Polidorus.
So I can't remember this for some reason, and it's like a running joke. And while we were sitting there watching this movie, I had looked up nothing on this movie, and I said, the theme in this, it might just be me. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Conan the Barbarian. It's a little bit sweeping, a little bit dramatic. And guess who was the composer?
Basil Polidorus.
Yeah, so that was a fun little treat for me. It gave me the giggles.
Okay, so we're going to get into our first of our 2 new releases that we're reviewing this week. So we're going to start with Wind River. I feel like this didn't get a whole lot of press. I didn't see a lot of trailers for it. Not a lot of, press showings for Jeremy Renner or Elizabeth Olsen, who were the stars of the movie. It's written by Taylor Sheridan, who wrote, in addition to this, he wrote Sicario and Hell or High Water. And this one he directed as well. He did not direct the other 2. And I gotta say, seeing Wind River, there are so many parallels that can be drawn between both Sicario and Hell or High Water. I feel like it's they're all very signature Taylor Sheridan movies. He definitely, his writing and kind of the way he sets up his movies, they're all very similar in some ways.
I would say, though, that it does not make those films formulaic in any way, though. I loved this movie. I thought it was great. And I had seen a lot of TV trailers for this one pop up, but the trailers just kind of made it seem very generic, kind of a regular old crime drama movie, and I didn't really care if I saw it either way, but now that we did, I thought it was excellent.
This may be a theme today once we get into our next movie of trailers not necessarily being indicative of the film to follow. But I agree, the Wind River trailers were very generic and they were bland. And I'm not really sure, the movie's very kind of, I don't want to say plotting, but more methodical, I guess would be a good way to put it. It's not an action-packed movie. Where there's violence, it's for a reason, and there's it has a strong effect on you when you see it. There's short bursts of violence here and there, but I wouldn't really call it a violent movie necessarily. Meditative maybe. There's a lot of silence throughout the movie, and there's a lot of kind of just wide open spaces and desolation, and a very understated score that I think serves the movie well. Kind of like with Hell or High Water, in Hell or High Water, you've got it taking place kind of in this in kind of the West Texas desert, essentially. There's long stretches of nothing, and where there are cities and towns, most of them seem like they're boarded up, and the only people that have any money are the banks. You get a similar tone with this movie, which is set in northern Wyoming, kind of in the mountains, and it's just basically nothing but snow as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, definitely. I think in Taylor Sheridan movies, the location almost plays its own character, because it definitely is a central part to this story, Hell or High Water, and Sicario also being on the border. That's obviously hugely has to do with the plot of that movie as well. But I thought it's an interesting sort of device, I guess, that a lot of the events in the movie are due to the fact of where they are, and they're sort of cut off from major resources in a sense and things like that. So it gives that more survival and desolation kind of feel to it.
In addition to just, you could kind of call this environment as well. You're talking more the actual, physical part of the earth they're on, the environment, but also their economic environment plays a part in all of his movies as well. You've got, in Wind River, it takes place largely on an Indian reservation where basically, everything has been taken from these people. Their jobs, their livelihoods, they really have nothing much to live for, it seems like. and a lot of them end up resorting to, things like drugs, alcohol, and they definitely make a point of saying that there's not a lot to do up there, and everyone wants out, but you don't really have a lot of opportunity either. In Hell or High Water, it's kind of the same thing. Like, it's about these brothers growing up in West Texas, and they didn't really ever end up going anywhere. One of them ended up doing a stint in prison. The other one, stayed home and looked after his mom. I mean, it's about this lack of opportunity. In many cases, poverty. Definitely the criticism of big business or of corporations, which I guess thematically does go hand in hand with Robocop, although I didn't really catch it until now. Sicario, a bit different, but I think poverty still plays a role. In Sicario, you've got one of the storylines follows basically a Mexican family who's basically living in poverty, and the fact is that the only way the guy can make ends meet is by running drugs, which finds him essentially in the crosshairs of our main characters that we're following in that movie.
Going to main characters also, I think it's interesting the way he wrote both Elizabeth Olsen's character in Wind River, a little bit similar to Emily Blunt's character in Sicario also. Both strong female roles, capable female roles, but still both finding themselves kind of in over their heads. And I hate to say, that the male lead comes in and kind of rescues them. I don't know that that's what he's going for. I think he sort of has it ending up that way, but then tries to soften it a little bit with some dialogue and things like that. So I can at least appreciate that. But interesting female characters, I think, because usually in movies, I think you have either one or the other. The super independent, super self-sufficient, strong, saves-the-day woman, or the completely helpless woman. And I think it's a little more realistic that, some of these characters, while strong and capable, given the situation they're in or the setting that they're in, are, in a little deep.
If there's one criticism I have of the movie, it has to do with the fact that basically it's a murder, kind of procedural on an Indian reservation where Native Americans are the victims, and there's a Native American kind of chief of police that's like helping out with the investigation, but basically it's the local white guy and the white FBI agent that got sent in from out of town that come in and save the day and solve the crime for the Native Americans that apparently weren't capable of doing it for themselves. I don't know. It kind of sends a bad message.
Yeah, I thought that some of the cultural tones were a little bit touchy, because obviously the culture plays a huge role in this film, and the tension between the Native Americans and pretty much any other white person are pretty palpable, and understandably so. Jeremy Renner's character is sort of accepted, at least to a point, by the Native Americans because his kids are part Native American, and he was married to, one of the girls on the reservation. So he's well known and well liked. And it seems that he's very respectful of their culture and their ways. That being said, though, he sort of uses more of their culture and culture and ways to solve things than, yeah, exactly, like the police chief of, the reservation police kind of uses himself. So it is touchy. I can see both sides.
I feel like they could have handled it a little bit better. I don't want to. I mean, it's not whitewashing. It's not like it was, anything like that. But it maybe was a little bit ham-fisted in the way that they basically just have like the two white saviors come in and save the day. But that being said, it's kind of, I don't know. That could be a small issue for you. It could be no issue for you. Maybe it'll piss you off. It's kind of just up to your own personal interpretation of what you think of that. In terms of the actual film itself, everything that makes a good movie, this has it. and I didn't personally like it as much as Sicario or Hell or High Water, but it's damn close. It's a really good movie. I'd give it, a 7 out of 10 probably.
I think out of the three for me, and maybe it's just because we saw this one most recently, I'd have to give the other two another watch, but I think I liked this one best out of the three that he's done, and probably Sicario second and Hell or High Water third. But they're all very good movies, similar in interesting ways and not always obvious ways. So, yeah, I'd say I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, so Wind River, I think we both recommend it pretty highly, despite a couple flaws here and there. So I would definitely check that one out if you get a chance. It is one of those movies that probably deserves to be doing better at the box office than it is. So our last new release we're doing this week, I feel like this one is probably one of the more divisive movies that's come out in quite some time. It is from a very notable director. It's from Darren Aronofsky. The movie is Mother.
Exclamation point.
Yeah, I was going to say, with an exclamation point. Don't forget that. Not entirely sure why it needs an exclamation point. I guess that Mother and then the exclamation point stands for batshit crazy things are going to happen in this movie, because that's pretty much how it goes. I think this movie, if Wind River suffered from having too generic of a trailer, Mother suffered from having a horribly misleading trailer that really didn't give you any idea of what you were getting yourself into, which I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to go in knowing everything, especially in a movie like this. But if you were going in expecting a horror movie of any sort, or a haunted house movie, or something along those lines, you were going to be disappointed. That's not what you got.
Yeah, this is why I avoid trailers a lot of times, because I like to go into a movie knowing nothing. And I think I've been burned by spoiler-y trailers in the past. But yeah, this trailer was pretty much downright misleading. I think a better tactic would have been to just keep it the most vague you possibly could, and really just kind of use the star power in it to get people to go. Because, man, this is a thing.
I don't know. There's been a lot of flack that this movie's received because it's not doing well in the box office. It's gotten some terrible, terrible reviews from certain people. Now, largely, it is received positive reviews from critics. And I absolutely can understand that. I think we both saw the movie and enjoyed it well enough.
Yeah, I thought it was beautifully done visually, and I think I said this in a previous episode, I don't like Jennifer Lawrence, so I was really kind of steeling myself to put up with her for a few hours here watching a movie, and she did a much better job than I was kind of anticipating. So, but that being said, because of the weirdness of this movie, I think another actress could have probably done just as well.
So, before we get into spoiler territory, because we're going to absolutely 100% have to get into spoiler territory to even discuss what's going on in this movie, there's really no way to get into it otherwise. So if you want to not be spoiled, I guess, then I would say skip ahead to the end of the podcast. We're not going to do a top 5 list at the end of the episode this week. We've got some other stuff to talk about, so, I would skip ahead maybe 10-15 minutes, and hopefully you'll avoid most of the spoilers for Mother. All I'll say is I really, really liked the movie, so if you're on the fence about going to see it and don't want to be spoiled, I say go see it. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Make up your own mind for sure. That being said, I think you could also listen to the spoilers that we will be kind of giving. Some people probably will maybe enjoy the movie more or as much, kind of knowing some of the, I guess, behind the scenes type of things that goes on. But
yeah, if you know the references going in to look for, it definitely might help explain things a little bit better as you go, so you're not just sitting there trying to interpret everything on the fly like we had to.
Yeah, so either way, I still definitely recommend the movie. I did enjoy it. I thought it was done artfully, but you have to sort of be in the mood to see a weird, metaphorical, artsy movie.
All right, so spoilers beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. So the movie stars Javier Bardem and Jennifer Lawrence. They are referred to as him and mother. And that's basically it.
Javier Bardem is also the poet.
The poet or the creator.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Lawrence is her or the mother. That's pretty much it. They don't really give names. And their performances are both really good. They're both odd performances, honestly. Like, you don't really know what the hell is going on at the beginning of this movie. Javier Bardem's character is very, very, like, it seems like he's very driven. The movie begins, you find out he's a famous poet, but he hasn't written anything in a long time, and he basically has got like a writer's block. More, that's pretty much the best way to explain it.
Right, and he states, and this is pretty clear in the beginning of the movie too, that he lost everything in a fire. And then he found Jennifer Lawrence, and she has helped him rebuild everything. And they're in this sort of fantastical, beautiful farmhouse in the literal middle of nowhere. And she is constantly working on the house and wants to create a paradise for him. I think what's sort of strange about the performances, even early on, is the dialogue is pretty simple. Everything is kept pretty short, to the point, not a lot of explanation. You're really just kind of along for the ride going, what is exactly going on here?
And basically it's very bland. There's not a lot going on at the very beginning of this movie. But pretty quickly, somebody arrives at their house kind of out of the blue. And it's again an unnamed man named Ed, or not named, an unnamed man played by Ed Harris. And what's interesting is that this person basically makes themselves at home, and takes liberties with this house that you're wondering, like, okay. And Jennifer Lawrence's character as the mother is like very skeptical of what's going on, wondering why her husband is letting this man stay at their house, why he's so welcoming and open to this person, and rightfully so. It seems very strange right from the beginning.
Yeah, and you definitely feel like at this point Jennifer Lawrence is kind of she's having a normal reaction to this. This guy shows up out of nowhere. He is immediately welcomed in and sort of, oh yeah, stay the night. And she's like, why are you letting a stranger stay in our house? Whereas he just kind of continues to brush her off as, this is fine. And as Ed Harris's behavior gets more sort of comfortable and strange, you think, okay, she's the only person that's behaving normally in this situation. But as things go on, it just continues to get less and less normal.
Cue the man's wife showing up, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who I think probably was the most interesting character in the movie, just in terms of the way she played the character. Again, none of the characters in this movie really have names. They show up and they do things. They're playing their parts, essentially. And Michelle Pfeiffer was really unsettling. I mean, she, more so than Ed Harris, who played her husband, Michelle Pfeiffer is nosy, and she's kind of mean and bitchy
yeah.
and rude. And you're almost like appalled at how she's treating Jennifer Lawrence's character and how she's just treating this house, disregarding any sort of warnings about like rooms not to go into, things like that. And it basically does lead to a giant shitstorm. Not the biggest shitstorm in the movie, but a minor shitstorm when Michelle Pfeiffer and Ed Harris's characters' sons arrive, two bickering brothers. That bickering turns into quarreling, turns into fighting, turns into literally beating the shit out of each other until one of them suffers a not so good fate. you can stop if you're getting any of these allegories yet. They're after knowing that they were what they were and kind of seeing
I know,
the
it
whole
seems
movie, they're a
obvious
bit
now.
on the nose. But if it's not making sense, since we're getting into spoilers right away, Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer are basically Adam and Eve in this scenario, and her two sons, played by Domhnall Gleeson and somebody who I didn't recognize. But Domhnall Gleeson is Cain, and the other brother is Abel. So, of course, Cain kills Abel. And the entire movie is kind of filled with these biblical allegories. So you've got the creator, the poet, Javier Bardem, and I guess what you'd consider like Mother Earth in Jennifer Lawrence.
Also, there's some things going on with the house itself also. She has these moments where she seems very, like, connected to the house, and she will, like, touch a wall or put her head up against a wall, and you kind of get a scene of, like, a beating heart. So throughout the movie, you're kind of wondering, too, like, where the connection will be, and this is where, in the beginning, too, you think that it is going to be more haunted house-style movie. I guess what Aronofsky was trying to go for was actually that Jennifer Lawrence and the house were like one and the same. They're interchangeable, or one.
There's a lot of biblical imagery kind of thrown in the mix too. More so kind of later on in the movie, but even if you just look at the layout of the house, you've got like the basement, which is very hellish. There's fire. It's dark. Then as you go up towards the top floor basically is off limits. And the only one allowed in the room on the top floor is the creator, or Javier Bardem, where he that's kind of his room where he has like his office where he creates. So I guess if you wanted to call that like heaven and then the basement hell, you've got the main floor, which is kind of where everyone lives. So there's a lot going on, and it gets very bizarre from it's basically as soon as the whole Cain and Abel situation is resolved. One of them is dead, and out of the blue, like totally uninvited, like unexpected, Jennifer Lawrence's character has been spending this time just cleaning blood off the floor from this fight. Out of nowhere, like 50, 100 people just show up at the house for like a makeshift wake, essentially.
Oh yeah, I thought you were skipping ahead for a second, but yes, the wake is strange, and Javier Bardem says, well, these people, they suffered a great loss today. It's the least we could do to invite them into our home. Movie is still somewhat in normal territory at this point, aside from the fact that you've noticed that this house is plunked down in the middle of like a wheat field surrounded by trees. There's literally no driveway, no sidewalk. That's something at least I noticed right away. Jennifer Lawrence never leaves the house. There's never like a car. I mean, so sort of very basic logistical things are missing. So, and it gives it kind of that almost dreamlike, but if you've ever had a dream that seemed very mundane and realistic, sort of like that.
There's a lot going on though once this kind of party kicks into gear. You've got people like just running around the house trying to find a room to fuck in. You've got people just basically like making a fucking mess, trashing things, just
painting walls like to try and be helpful.
Oh yeah,
but
like
just doing stuff to the house.
And then of course once they've treated Mother Earth in this case poorly enough, what happens? But they sit on a sink that hasn't been set properly, despite warnings from Jennifer Lawrence's character. Breaking the sink and causing a giant water disaster a la the Great Flood. So they essentially clear out all of the humans who have been destroying the planet via a flood. So just more biblical imagery coming into play here.
Yeah, which was interesting because we really didn't pick up on that while we were watching the film. This was stuff we read about afterwards.
Neither of us are very well versed in our Bible.
Yeah,
studies.
I think other people, if you are, more religious or were raised in the, Christian faith, you maybe would pick up on some of this. That was some of the criticism of this particular work, was some people felt it was a little too on the nose. that the metaphorical things were too obvious and kind of eye roll inducing. I thought it kind of worked.
That being said, the third act of the movie is where it kind of takes off and becomes like a truly like Darren Aronofsky-esque movie. It gets really out of hand really quickly. Basically, fast forward to a little ways down the road, Javier Bardem has created he's finished his new poem, and it's going to be a great hit, and he's all excited, and now his impotence is gone, his writer's block is gone, and he pumps a baby into Jennifer Lawrence, and she's pregnant, and everyone's happy, and it's just wonderful. And then all of his fans just kind of show up out of the blue, and there's like thousands of people outside of their house, and this interrupts like a very nice dinner that was being made for him, and Jennifer Lawrence put a lot of work into this, and Javier Bardem is just signing autographs and doing interviews for his adoring fans that are just pouring in from God knows where.
And then the fans, it turns into like a club scene in the house. Like all of a sudden there's like music thumping and people dancing, and you're like, okay, this has gone in a weird direction, and it's just more and more and more people going completely crazy, not listening to her.
People ripping things out, like ripping boards off the wall to like take
stealing
with them
all
because
their
it's
stuff.
something of his. You've got people just putting his picture up on the wall, like idolizing him. So you've got this very like this idol, this kind of this idolization going on, but in a very like expedited and very extreme way.
He, kind of people want not only his autograph now, but they want to be touched by him. And he smears ink on the forehead of a fan, which of course is very, Ash Wednesday, getting the ashes spread on your forehead. I was sort of raised Catholic, but not really, so I have a limited understanding. But that was another sort of obvious, reference. And at this point, I was starting to pick up on some of those things, especially because these fans are now worshiping him. So that, definitely draws the religious parallels.
And I would say at this point is when the movie is going to absolutely piss people off and turn them off to it. Jennifer Lawrence gives birth to the child.
Well, before this, though, it gets even crazier before she gives birth.
That's true.
The house turns into a literal war zone. Like, things are exploding. People are coming in to save her, dressed as soldiers. People are getting their faces blown off. I mean, it gets really
It does get
intense.
Quite violent and intense, and you don't really understand what the hell is happening at the time. It's all very abstract and not realistic in any way, but it's just bizarre. Anyways, of course, Javier Bardem finds her and saves her and brings her to, like, the top floor of the house where they're safe. They're, like, heaven, I guess you can call it. And she gives birth. And she is, to a son, yes, who at this point, she is so furious and pissed off at the fact that she has been essentially like ignored and thrown to the wolves in favor of his followers and or fans, that she won't even let him touch the baby.
Well, she can tell what's going to happen because he wants to hold the child, and they're barricaded in this room, and he says, they just want to see him. And immediately once the crowd outside is mentioned, she gets very, protective and suspicious, rightfully so. She's been literally beaten and trampled at this point.
And then what happens? She eventually falls asleep. It's an interesting scene of him basically staring her down while she just gets more and more exhausted trying to keep herself awake. She falls asleep. She wakes up all of a sudden. Oh shit, the baby's gone. And what's happening? He is carrying the baby out to this crowd of crazy cultish worshippers. And then what does he do? He hands the baby to them, who then
like crowd surfs.
They basically crowd surf the baby around. And Jennifer Lawrence is now in full flip the fuck out mode, running after these people trying to get her baby back. And then you hear a noise. And the noise may or may not be the sound of the baby's neck snapping as it's being crowd surfed around a group of crazy cultists.
Yeah. I obviously you can tell where that's going as soon as it starts happening, but
it gets
I know,
worse though.
Oh, for sure. For some people, just that alone is going to upset them and turn them off enough that the whole movie is now out the window for them.
So
yeah,
what happens next? Within the blink of an eye, basically, she parts the crowd, and sitting on like an altar, essentially, is her like butchered, literally like cut up into pieces and flayed open baby. And all of the cultists are essentially like eating pieces of the baby.
Yeah. So at this point now, if shit had not gotten real before, it's real now. She starts, freaking out, trying to, kill all the people who are around, trying to get literal pieces of the baby
she's
back.
She's literally murdering everybody within sight.
And they start, beating her in earnest, saying terrible things to her. Javier Bardem
kicking the shit out of her, punching her in the face. Basically, she is like on the verge of death.
Javier Bardem makes it back to her, and here's another super, obviously, I guess I wasn't thinking biblical when we first were watching this, but I see it now.
Yeah, we interpreted this another way, which I think is also valid.
Right.
But there's so many obvious biblical references.
She's saying they killed our baby, and obviously upset about this, and he says, we have to find a way to forgive them. So some pretty Jesus-y references right there if you're not on board yet.
Yeah. And basically the rest of the movie is Jennifer Lawrence completely disagreeing with this whole forgiveness thing, and she decides that she is going to just basically cleanse the house, and she basically blows the entire house up, killing everybody inside. And at that point, what happens? But basically, you see Javier Bardem's character untouched by this fire, ripping the heart out of Jennifer Lawrence's burnt, dying body. And it's like a little crystal thing. And by the way, this is also how the movie starts, although at the beginning of the movie, you don't really understand what the fuck is going on.
I mean, yeah, you just see the crystal kind of being broken apart from the ashes. You don't see where it comes from, though.
So yeah, he pulls this crystal out of Jennifer Lawrence's body, places it on a little pedestal, and then all of a sudden, all of the ash from the house disappears. The house is back to its fully restored state, and a new, not Jennifer Lawrence woman wakes up in the bed that was Jennifer Lawrence's bed. And this is the exact same way that the movie begins, only Jennifer Lawrence is the one that wakes up, basically informing us that this is a cycle that constantly keeps happening.
So immediately after, well, I guess I'll stop myself. I'm good at interrupting myself. Going back to first impressions of the film, there is no score to this film.
I think there might be, but it's not used often. There's a lot of times where the sounds in the house and the sounds of the people in the house are basically the score.
Right. The sounds of the house and in the house are really played up and focused on. Footsteps are a little bit louder than they should be. Someone washing a dish or scrubbing a board, the sounds are loud. And I'm kind of sensitive to sound, so I noticed this right off the bat. Squeaking bed springs, things like that, just all kind of amplified. That said, at the end of the movie, once we, obviously we're talking about what the hell just happened and what they were trying to go for, we both kind of thought that we were taking the creator and the poet theme a little more literally, in that we thought that this movie was a metaphor for the creative process. He basically goes through to super condense it, goes through a war zone to create something, which is then torn apart by people who may be his followers or torn apart by critics, but you have to find a way to forgive them so that you can create again. Which I think still kind of works, but yeah, then after we read about the biblical stuff, it made way more sense.
Yeah, and in the way that we looked at it, Jennifer Lawrence would have is more the playing the part of the female muse to the arrogant, conceited male artist.
Right, and they do call her the inspiration. Once he writes his, epic poem and returns to, work essentially and gets all these fans, his publisher or publicist, I wasn't really sure, shows up, played by Kristen Wiig, which was kind of a weird, face to see in the midst of the chaos. And she was normal at first. But she just refers to Jennifer Lawrence as the inspiration. Oh, there she is, the inspiration. So that kind of led you down that creative process path.
So, I mean, you could view it as a biblical allegory, which it definitely is. You could view it as a allegory for the creative process or the filmmaking process. I mean, it's not like directors are never self-referential in their work, and that could definitely be the case here. Oddly enough, Jennifer Lawrence started dating Darren Aronofsky during the filming of this movie, which just seems really kind of fucked up, considering the whole kind of way the movie works. That being said, the other thing you could kind of view it through, I feel like there's definitely some sort of allegory to just kind of the way we kind of treat the planet. I don't want to, I don't know if he's necessarily being preachy about global warming or about the way we treat the planet. Too. Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, there are definitely
I didn't
biblical.
I didn't see the interview she did, so.
Yeah, there were biblical, allegories going on, but he said that the purpose of making the film was to draw attention to what we are doing to the planet, and he felt that it was something that needed to be made now. So I thought that was kind of interesting that. You're talking both about the literal earth and then sort of religious themes too, but interesting. It
makes sense though. You've got people just trashing this beautiful house and acting like they're doing nothing wrong. Basically, they treat it like they own it, and they destroy it without giving a fuck. And it really, it's, I don't know, it's unsettling to watch. You feel weird watching it almost. You feel kind of tense, and you don't feel good about what's going on, even though it is bizarre and over the top. And I don't know, I thought it was a really, really interesting movie, and I liked it a lot. And I feel like any movie that can give you hours of talking points afterwards, I mean, even if you end up thinking it's not a great movie, and in this case I think we both liked it, but I mean, if you can talk for hours about a movie afterwards, I think that it's a good movie. I don't think you can see a movie, if I see a movie and I just immediately have no thoughts on it because it was fucking another Transformers movie or something, those are bad movies. That's not what I want to see a movie for.
Yeah, and now it's sort of drawing some parallels to other movies that are divisive and highly talked about and metaphorical. I will say I did like this one. You do have to be in the mood to see something that's very symbolic. A movie that came out several years ago, The Tree of Life, I thought was a pretentious piece of shit. And I was promptly told by some of my other movie-loving friends that I just didn't understand it. That's not the case. I thought that the going back in time to the dinosaurs, there were dinosaurs in that movie. Completely ridiculous. I did not enjoy that one. And maybe upon a rewatch, I would have a greater appreciation for it. But I thought that this one, maybe it is a little on the nose with some of their symbolism, but I still enjoyed it. I thought it was an unsettling movie, and that was sort of the point of it.
One thing, though, definitely not a horror movie. I don't think there's really anything too scary in this movie at all, period. I mean, unsettling maybe a little bit, but not in a horror movie way. No way. If anything, to me, it came off, especially once it got going towards the end, it's so over the top. And there's so much crazy shit happening that you're, bewildered. I mean, it was almost... It kind of had this darkly comic tone to me, because even, the Jennifer Lawrence character is, cannot even comprehend how rude and awful all of these people are being, and they play it so straight. Like, they're just, like, they laugh it off. They're like, huh, what are you talking about?
Well, right.
It's kind of funny sometimes.
Yeah, she's the weirdo for thinking that they're being rude or for being upset about something. They make her... It's almost like a giant, like, gaslighting bonanza. They just make her feel like an idiot all the time.
And I mean, leave it to me to find it kind of funny, but I really think the ridiculousness of it all is a little bit hilarious at times. And it gets really dark, obviously, too, and fucked up, but, it's all in good fun. In the name of the Bible, I guess. Whatever. So yeah, this movie suffered from some terrible marketing, which led to some very unhappy audiences, which led to something else I want to get off my chest here, which is the fact that out of nowhere, once in a blue moon, we will hear about this mythical thing called the Cinemascore. We hear about Rotten Tomatoes ratings, we hear about different review scores that people give. Cinemascore basically comes up whenever something gets a real shitty Cinemascore grade, because it's based on 40 audience reactions, random audience reactions from around the country. This one got an F, and there's only been 19 movies or 12 movies or something that have ever gotten Fs. Some of them are pretty solid movies, actually. Most of them, in fact, none of them are total shit, except for maybe one or two. So my point being, Cinemascore fucking blows. To prove my point on Cinemascore, I would like to read 4 notable high Cinemascores and 4 Cinemascores that are all lower than that, and just let you guys be the judge of how fucking stupid this system is. So, notable Cinemascores that are a B or higher. Transformers 3 Dark of the Moon got an A. Jack and Jill, starring Adam Sandler and Al Pacino, got a B. Bucky Larson, Born to be a Star, starring Nick Swardson, got a B. Crossroads, starring Britney Spears, got a B. So the next 4 movies scored lower than all of those. Boogie Nights by Paul Thomas Anderson. Drive with Ryan Gosling. The Royal Tenenbaums by Wes Anderson. And Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I just want you to keep in mind that all of those scored worse than Crossroads with Britney Spears, according to Cinemascore. So if you ever decide not to see a movie simply because it got a bad grade on Cinemascore, I will hunt you down, I will find you, and I will kill you.
This isn't a good way to get followers, by the way.
I don't have a particular set of skills. I probably won't be able to accomplish these things.
Yeah, just to cap it off here, when we walked out of the theater, which I'm sure we've mentioned this before, we are now in the habit of seeing 9 a.m. movies during the week when I'm not working.
Which means we always have the retiree crowd with us in these movies.
Yes. So as we were walking out of this film, there were other people in the theater with us, and this older gentleman, to Matt or no one in particular, that was the worst movie I've ever seen. And Matt responded with, well, it was interesting, to say the least. And he was like, yeah, it was interesting until it was the worst movie I've ever seen.
He then proceeded to go into the bathroom as I had to pee, and proceeded to speak to me from his pooping stall while I peed.
I figured he was also at a urinal, no?
No, he was not at a urinal. He dropped trow and just unleashed some fucking horrid shit, and then decided he was going to tell me how it was really dumb that they had to kill her. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, he thought that she didn't have to die in the end. It's like, were you not on board, at least by the time the movie goes absolutely crazy, you are aware that this is not like a movie that's based in reality. This is metaphorical or symbolic. So you thought that she was gonna live? How would that make any sense?
Listen, this guy, I don't know what would even draw him. This is by the way, a guy that went to see this movie by himself. Guy probably in his 50s or early 60s. Just decided he's going to go see this movie by himself because of maybe Jennifer Lawrence wears a see-through t-shirt. She does. But that might be the only reason that this guy wanted to go see this movie. That's the kind of person that he is.
Yeah, agreed. So it was a treat to walk out of that movie, getting the first-hand review of people that, sort of contributed to this Cinemascore rating.
Basically, he's the reason I'm not proud of our country. And he is also the reason that they got an F on Cinemascore. He's the person that Cinemascore, like, they found him. And they were like, what do you rate this movie? And he was like, it's the worst thing of all time. It fucking sucked. None of it made any sense. Why were there soldiers shooting at people in a house? Why did they set it on fire? She died. They pulled the thing out. What's happening? I need a cookie. Fuck that guy. He made me very angry. That being said, that's done. That's it for my rant on Cinemascore. We're not doing, like I said, we're not doing a top 5 list. I want to talk about Cinemascore because it's fucking stupid. Don't pay attention to it. I'm upset that I had brought this much attention to it already. Just never talk about it again. Next thing I want to do, just before we call it a day, I just want to let everyone know that there won't be a new full episode next week because we're going to be going to Fantastic Fest in Austin for the second half of the festival. So we'll be seeing movies there from Monday to Thursday next week. So we won't really be seeing any new releases, and we won't be home to record really.
So many movies.
What we'll be doing next week, though, every day, every night at the end of the day, or maybe in the morning, the next morning, depending on when I have time to do it, when we have time to kind of write things up. If you go to our site at cinemamdpodcast.com, I'm going to be posting blog posts with reviews of pretty much every movie we see. There'll be spoiler-free reviews because obviously people aren't going to really be able to see these until way down the road when they actually come out. Which could be, anytime from a month from now to a year from now. It really just depends. Some of these movies don't even have distribution deals yet. Others, I know one of them premieres on Netflix like the Friday we get back. So, it's all over the place. A lot of good movies, though. Last year we saw some really good stuff. So if you're looking forward to, anything playing at Fantastic Fest, you can, if you go to fantasticfest.com, you can check out the slate of movies that are playing there. Definitely let us know if there's something that you particularly want us to review. We can do our best to at least get one of us into a screening of it to review it for you. We're going to try to do some video reviews up on YouTube too in the future. We're going to maybe attempt to do some short video reviews for Fantastic Fest and put those up. We'll put them on the website. Once we get them up on YouTube, we'll link them to the website as well. But again, we are up on YouTube now as well. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube. And we're going to start putting some short videos up, short reviews, Blu-ray unboxings, little shit like that. So check us out on YouTube if you get a chance. No promises on the videos while we're at Fantastic Fest. I'm going to bring basically my iPad and a microphone and hope for the best. So the video quality might not be amazing, but I'm going to hope to post something while we're there other than just the blogs. So that pretty much wraps it up. So next week, just, I'll be posting on social media constantly too. So you'll be well aware of, if you're, if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, fucking anywhere, I'll be letting everyone know whenever we post blog updates with reviews. Definitely, if you haven't already subscribe on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcast from. Leave us a review on iTunes as well. Just helps pop us up the search engines a little faster on iTunes.
We want your feedback. How are we doing?
Oh yeah, we do want feedback too.
Leave a comment card.
Yeah, leave comments, leave reviews. Send us messages, emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, Twitter, tweet things.
Tweet at us.
I suck at Twitter. Tweet us. There you go. I sound like an old fucking person, but I'm new to Twitter. I'm getting there. I'm getting better. I got 40 followers. It's pretty cool. So, all that good stuff. Fantastic Fest next week, and then we'll get back to weekly episodes after that. So, that's about it. I guess thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See ya.